Friends, welcome to the lecture series on debates in Indian politics. We are talking about the unit 1 of your syllabus. And this unit 1 is about how to understand the Indian state, how to understand politics in India. And today's reading is Sunil Khilnani. Sunil Khilnani. And friends, Sunil Khilnani was a faculty in the King's College London, where he was the director of India Institute. Now he is with the Ashoka University Department of Political Science. And today's reading is Sunil Khilnani's book, The Idea of India. The Idea of India. And we will be reading only the introduction chapter of the book. That is a new introduction to the latest edition of that book. And the introduction of Sunil Khilnani's Idea of India is titled Ideas of India. Ideas of India. That is an 8-page reading, but that will be a good opening for you to later read the whole book if you want to read, or if you would like the idea in this book, you can read. So this will be just an opening of the book, some few ideas. And friends, in this book, Sunil Khilnani is trying to tell you what is meant by the idea of India. And friends, we know that by the time when there was discussion going on about granting independence to India, and there was a strong reason that India should be granted independence, there were still political leadership in Britain who believed that India as a political order, India as a political society, India as a government will crumble down if granted independence. And many influential people in the British leadership believed that India would not survive one decade if granted independence, because they had the feeling that Indians are not skilled enough to rule themselves. Indians don't have the idea of rational bureaucracy or rational government. They don't know how to practice the idea of democracy. That is why many intellectuals, many influential people in the British leadership long ago believed that if granted independence, India would not survive more than 10 years. And friends, no matter what, India survived. India survived, and that was all a wonder also, because people who had Poor respect for India always believed that a Westphalian idea of state cannot be implemented in India. The Westphalian idea of state cannot be implemented in India. That was the reason why uh, many influential people in the British circle believed that India should not be granted independence because they don't know how to conduct government, how to self-rule. These ideas are alien to Indian society. Moreover, these people believed that India is not fit for a Westphalian idea of state. And what is the Westphalian idea of state? I hope you remember that, when you think about the Westphalian idea of state, you will see that, take the case of Britain. There is a dominant religion in Britain, there is a dominant language in Britain, and there is a dominant race in Britain. If you go to Spain, if you go to Portugal, Italy, Germany, France, friends, the thing is same. What is that? All these societies do have one single language, one dominant religion, one dominant, what might be called a race. But take the case of India. There is no single language. There is no single race. There is no single religion. So how can you practice democracy, the idea of nation state, in such a diverse society? That's why people objected that you should not grant independence to India because this society will not survive with this much, diversity, this kind of plurality. So, friends, however, this idea survived, and this idea survived because we had certain, lighthouses of direction towards future. We had certain, very good commanding leadership, which led us to future. And this story of India and how we survived and how we became independent and marched to the future. This idea has been documented by several writers. And Sunil Khilnani, in his book, Idea of India, also goes into the same track in which he is trying to narrate to his reader what is the idea of India since India became independent. And friends, Sunil Khilnani himself tells the reader that these ideas have already been told by several writers before, that how India became independent and how India moved to the future. And this book he had published in the year 1997, 50 years after India became independent. On 15th anniversary of India's independence, his book was released. And in the introduction chapter, that is the ideas of India, Sunil Khilnani tells the reader that the story of public life in post-independent India, the story of public life in post-independent India has been presented by a vivid collection of narratives, by writers, by characters, by films, by plays, by poems, by travel writings. And you know that his book Idea of India is also one of such books which talked about the story of post-independent India since 1947. And for example, you will see, if you go for a Google search, you can see so many interesting and intriguing books being written about how India became independent and how we march towards the future, and whether it was a success story or a failure story. Right. And you see, if you Google search, you will see a book by Patrick French, India a Portrait, a very good book about India. India a Portrait by Patrick French. Or if you Google search Perry Anderson, you will find another interesting book, The Indian Ideology. Indian Ideology. That's an interesting book about post independent India. Or you will see a very intriguing book by one of India's greatest critic, by its own son, V.S. Naipaul, who wrote a very controversial book about India. India, a million mutinies now. Or uh, you know, you know, Sanjeev Sanyal. The Sanjeev Sanyal has written Indian Renaissance. Or Amartya Sen has written Argumentative Indian. Or Meghna Desai has written Rediscovery of India. Or the most famous book, Ramendra Guha's India After Gandhi. This is one of the best books on independent India, that how we traveled this far. And author Sunil Khilnani acknowledged all these writers. He has acknowledged all these writers. And he has already acknowledged the fact that so many writings had already been in the public domain about the idea of India. But he had some reservations on these writings, that he is doubtful of what is it all about being told, that who wrote about what, which story is being told in these writings, and what is exactly the history of India since 1947, and whose history is being told. And he is trying to answer these questions by the book Idea of India. And friends, he himself acknowledged that there are three kinds of writings about post-independent India. There are three kinds of writings about post-independent India. That is, one is the imperialist account of post-independent India, the imperialist account. Such as you may read Nirad C. Chowdhury's famous book, An Autobiography of an Unknown Indian. Nirad C. Chowdhury has beautifully narrated how stupid how stupid the idea of India is, and he had always respected British Empire in India, British Raj in India. He was an Indian, but he had a poor respect for the very idea of India. Like many British people who believed that India would not survive. And Nirad C. Chowdhury's book, An Autobiography of an Unknown India, is an imperialist account of India. Or books like James Morris, who had written Pax Britannica, 1976. That's a 1969 book, Pax Britannica. That's a book about British Empire in India, written by a British author. Or there are imperialist accounts like E.M. Foster's A Passage to India. There's a 1924 book about India, A Passage to India, by E.M. Foster. Or V.S. Naipaul himself has written another book, An Area of Darkness. That's an imperialist account of India, an area of darkness. Or if you read Rudyard Kipling's Kim, K-I-M, Kim, that's also an imperialist account of India. So author Sunil Khilnani addressed that these kinds of imperialist accounts are there, very interesting accounts of India. Or you might see there are post-imperialist imperial accounts. Post-imperial accounts that so many writers have written about India without being influenced by British worldview. So many writers have written about India. For example, as I told you, Rediscovery of India by Meghna Desai, or India After Gandhi by Ramendra Guha, Argumentative Indian by Amartya Sen. These are books written in the genre of post-imperialist narratives on India. And friends, However, one strand of writing is very important for us. One strand of writing is very important for us. And what is that? That is the nationalist account of India. The nationalist account of India. And in a sense, the nationalist account of India had liberated India from Britain. The nationalist account of India, that the nationalist freedom fighters had their own notions about what India is and how India should get independence from Britain and how we should move towards a future and what India holds for the people who live in this part of the world. So the nationalist account is one of the dominant accounts of India. And see, in the nationalist tradition, three books are very important. Three books are very important, and most of you might be remembering those books. One is by Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru's famous book, The Discovery of India, is one of this nationalist account of India, which portrayed what is India and what was our culture, what was our past and what was our literature and what was our scientific temper, and how India should get independence and how we should move towards the future and what it holds for the different people in India. And this was one of the beautiful accounts of what India is and how it should be in the future. So Nehru's Discovery of India is of course a nationalist account of India. And another very striking book about India, certainly you might remember, by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi's Indian Home Rule. Nehru has written his book in the year 1946. 1946, 1 year before India became independent. Nehru has written The Discovery of India. But Gandhi has written his book, in 1909, I think, the Indian, Indian Home Rule. 1909. I forgot the exact date. Indian Home Rule was also another very important strand of narratives about what is the idea of India and what constitutes India, what are its people, what are its natives. Like Nehru, he had also his own version of India, Indian people, Indian society, Indian culture, and how we should rule ourselves, how we should liberate from ourselves, how we should get independence from Britain, and how we should live in this land, in this geographical territory. And Gandhi had his own version that he presented in his book, Indian Home Rule or Hindu Swaraj, a famous book, a nationalist account of India. And another which doesn't fall into this category, that is, Discovery of India as well as Indian Home Rule. That this book I'm going to tell you will not fall in the category of, either Discovery of India nor Indian Home Rule, but that's a striking book, a nationalistic account about what actually India is and who are its real people. And it is none other than B.R. Ambedkar. B.R. Ambedkar had written so many things, but one book is very striking book, that is The Annihilation of Caste. The Annihilation of Caste. And in Annihilation of Caste, Ambedkar presented a notion of India that is square opposite to what Gandhi had said and what Nehru had said. That was square opposite to the notions of India being stated by Nehru in his Discovery of India as well as Gandhi in his Indian Home Rule. And Ambedkar had portrayed a different account of India in which, India is home to a specific class of people who presented what may be called an indigenous account, a Dalit, otherwise called a Dalit account of India. That this land is the home of Dalits. Using some, Buddhist literature, a Buddhist perspectives, he was trying to portray a different India. But friends, these three books are starting points of nationalist account of India. And Sunil Khilnani in his introductory essay, Ideas of India, to his book Idea of India, stated that imperial account, post-imperial account, as well as nationalist account are so dominating, and these are all very important also. Reading these books will give you a holistic picture of what India is. And he was saying that the post-imperial story of India, like the one presented by argumentative Indian, or India after Gandhi by Ramendra Guha, or Rediscovery of India by Meghnad Desai, or Indian Renaissance by Sanjeev Sanyal, or Indian Ideology by Perry Anderson. So these books sorry, these books talks about both the rise and fall of India. Both the rise and fall of India. This Amartya Sen's kind of book, Argumentative Indian, or India after Gandhi, Ramendra Guha. If you read these books, you will see strength in the idea of India, as well as decline in the idea of India. That this is both a positive and a negative account of India. But see friends, the nationalist account is very different. Nationalist account looks at the future, and they hold a bright future for India. And in their versions, India is home to different kinds of people, different races, different tribes, different nationalities commingled in this part. The nationalistic account, that is Nehru account, or Gandhi account, or Ambedkarite account, gives space to different varieties of people in India. And all of you will have space in this part of the world. In this experiment called the idea of India, you will all have your own space in this land. That is their account. But if you read post-imperialist account, you will see a genre in which you will be told that India was both a success story and India was also a story of failure. That is post imperialist account of India. And anyway, the idea of India since 1947 was an attempt to wipe out the imperial history of India, the imperial administration in India, the imperial or colonial residues in India. That we should wipe away all the debris, all the remnants of our colonial British past. That was the aim of the idea of India. And you will see in this writing, Sunil Khilnani is going to tell you the different kinds of people who made India, different kinds of people who contributed to the idea of India. And certainly, he agrees the fact that the nationalistic account of India, which was a dominant narrative about India, was also promising, in the sense that the nationalistic account has given spaces to all the sections of people who are living in this part of the world. And all people were united in an ambitious project that we should get independence and we should move towards the future. And in our journey towards future, all of you people living in this part of the world will be united. All of you will have a space. This is a nationalistic account. And we were somehow successful in this nationalistic identity of India. That by the time India became independent, Sunil Khilnani agrees the fact that all the people in India were united. But friends, Khilnani is going to tell the reader that this ambitious project of a nationalistic idea of India, that all the people who are living in India, who are united by an ambitious project called the Constitution of India, was a promising one. However, this idea is going to be challenged now. Because non-national identities has proliferated now. He has agreed. national identities has proliferated. A national identity united India in the year 1947. We got independence because we were united by a nationalistic idea of India. But that nationalistic idea of India is challenged now because non-national identities has proliferated. Some historians, some historians have begun to examine the processes through which the national identities have been molded out of pressures and opportunities of power. How different national identities have, begun to emerge, and these identities, which once united India, is being challenged now. So we can see that those situated at different locations in Indian society, say women, Dalit, or tribals, or racial or regional identities, for example, the Dravidian politics, the Khalistan, the Northeast. So different locations, those situated in different locations in Indian society, which were all once united for an Indian experiment called the Constitution of India. In 1947, all these sections were united. All these sections were united in 1947. But what happened? Some 50 years later, when we look back, friends, Khilnani is arguing that those situated at different locations in Indian society have produced their own distinctive conceptions of the nation. Their own distinctive conceptions of the nation. Once, or precisely speaking, 1947, the time India became independent, all of you friends, you were all united by an idea of India, a single idea of India, that India should get liberated. India should get right to self-determination. India should govern themselves. India should be freed from the yoke of British Empire. That was the unifying idea in 1947. Friends, Khilnani now is telling you, friends, that the reader, you understand that this idea of a unified idea of India has been questioned. And this has been questioned by those situated at different locations in India society, because they started telling their own distinctive conceptions of the nation. You look at the Dravidia movement in South India. They are presenting, or Periyar movement. Periyar, for example, Periyar doesn't endorse the idea of a constitution. He never believed in the Indian constitution. He never believed in the Indian parliament. He never believed in the Indian democracy. He never believed in the idea of Gandhi nor in the idea of Jawaharlal Nehru. He never endorsed any of these modern ideas which are being instituted in this part of the world. He rejected all these notions. And he had presented what may be called a Dravidian conception of Indian nationality. So, but these ideas were once very weak. By the time India became independent, began to get strengthened, began to be strengthened 50 years later. Or if you go to Northeast, regionalist aspirations are thriving. They're presenting a new version of India which are square opposite to the nationalistic notion of India. Or if you go to Kashmir, or if you go to Punjab, you will see, friends, different nationalistic expressions which are square opposite to the nationalistic identity of India which got independence in 1947. And Khilnani says, friends, Khilnani is telling you that by the time India became independent, by the time India became independent, one of the important ideas that united all of us, was the notion of state. We had a very powerful state. That Khilnani agrees that fact. We had a very powerful notion of state. So a modern notion of state arrived in India in the year 1947. And it is a historical fact. We have shifted from a society of hierarchy, a society based on patriarchal power, a society based on privileges. We have shifted from that idea to a single sovereign agency called the state in 1947. So, by the time India became independent, Khilnani argues there were so much pressure on the Indian state because so many people in different parts of India all looking at the Indian state and demanding that we need this and that. All the sections of Indian society were demanding benefits. And there was so much pressure on the Indian state, so much pressure at that scale which the Indian state was not able to deliver. So that was one very important point about the idea of India in 1947. And second point is agreeing, friends, that in 1947, by the time India became independent, Indians had experimented in a beautiful political idea. And what is that political idea? Along with the idea of a nation state, India had experimented in another very important, powerful political idea. Khilnani says it is the idea of democracy. And people in India began to experiment in democracy. And Khilnani says that after the French Revolution, after the American Revolution, the most important decisive revolution in the whole history of mankind is the idea of India's independence, because in 1947, a large section of world's population began to practice democracy. And for Khilnani, that was a third moment in the march of democracy. After American Revolution and French Revolution. And third, Khilnani agrees that India as a society, a community with a shared moral order, with a sophisticated assemblage of great and little traditions. There are great traditions and little traditions, which were all set against the imperatives of a modern commercial society, of Europe and Americas. And seen from this perspective, Khilnani argues civilization in India was confronting modernity. Civilization in India was confronting modernity. And civilization stand in India was moving towards respect for individual autonomy and choice. And in 1947, the civilizational strand in India attained a distinctive character compared to its past. And that we know our past was not that appreciative. And by the time India became independent in 1947, the civilization strand in India also attained modernity. And see, he is agreeing three very important shifts in 1947. One is the notion of a powerful state. Second, the notion of political democracy. Third, modernity. So, state, democracy, and modernity. These were three important factors that led India to future. And of course, the fundamental agencies of modernity in India, the year 1947 were certainly our colonial experiences, our touch with the Europe. Second, the notion of state. Third, nationalism. Then democracy, economic development. All these components of modernity shaped the idea of India. That colonial experiences, the state, nationalism, democracy, economic development. These are agencies of modernity. All these shaped India. And we believed there is possibility that India could be united into a single political community. Friends, in 1947, we believed that in 1947, Indians believed that India could be united into a single political community. That you have Christians, Buddhists, Islam, Hindus, Parsis, Jains, so much religious diversity. You have different languages. You have different cultures. And all these, identities can be united into a single political community called India. That we believed in 1947. And it was a wagon an idea. That is a promise. A promise that we had a promise. We had a foresight, a wagon an idea, the idea of India. So this was a wagon of India by the nationalistic leadership. The nationalist elite had a wagon an idea, WAGR, wagon an idea, the idea of India. The nationalist elites, however, had no a single clear definition of the idea of India. That was also a contradiction. In 1947, when India became independent, the nationalistic leadership had no single idea of India. But they all believed that all the people in India will be united into a single political community called India. But if you ask each of those leadership, what is the idea of India? That there are Christians, there are Islam, there are Hindus, there are Tamils, there are Malayalis, there are Kannadigas, or North Indians, South Indians, East Indians, or West Indians, or Northeast Indians. What India holds for each of these people? They had no clear answer. That's why Khilnani says that, When you ask the nationalist elite, what is the idea of India? There will be no clarity. There is no single clear definition of the idea of India at that time. However, friends, Khilnani agrees that one of the remarkable facts about the nationalist movement that brought India to independence was its capacity to entertain or accommodate diversity. Diversity. That India's nationalist movement was able to accommodate diversity. India is home to Christians. India is home to Islam. India is home to Hindus. India is home to South Indians, North Indians, Central Indians. India is home to, Pandits. India is home to Northeast people. So there was a pluralistic notion of India. And if you ask a nationalistic elite at that time, how can you define the diversity of India, which is united by a nationalistic idea of India? The elite will tell you, the nationalist elite will tell you, using A.K. Ramanujan's famous line. A.K. Ramanujan says, if you ask an Irishman about what a trouser is, when asked whether trousers were singular or plural, the Irishman will tell the trouser is singular at the top. The trouser is singular at the top and plural at the bottom. But it's a trouser. It's a trouser which is singular at the top and plural at the bottom. This is what an Irishman says. Right. But if you ask the same question to an Indian elite nationalist leader before independence, who believed in the plurality of India, and ask him, what is the idea of a dhoti? D-H-O-T-I, dhoti. What is the idea of a dhoti? And the nationalist elite will tell you, the idea of India is like the idea of a dhoti. The idea of India is like the idea of a dhoti. With endless faults. And its diversity was emblematically incarnated in the gallery of characters who constituted the nationalist pantheon. So Khilnani is saying that if you ask that same question to a nationalist elite, he will tell you that a dhoti is plural at the top as well as at the bottom. A dhoti is plural at the top as well as at the bottom. So that's why Khilnani agrees. Nationalist identity was plural, that it was home to a diverse segments of people. And this idea of plural nationality, the idea of this plural nationality was not the single-handed contribution of any particular leader. This idea of India that we have inherited in 1947 was not a single-handed contribution of any particular leader. There were a variety of makers of India. Ramendra Guha has written himself a book about that, the makers of India. Sunil Khilnani has himself has written a book about 50 Indians who had contributed to the very idea of India. 50 Indians who had contributed to the very idea of India. And that book is Incarnations. Incarnations by Sunil Khilnani. Or if you read Ramendra Guha's Makers of Modern India, that these writers will tell you the idea of India is not the single-handed contribution of any particular individual, but it is contributed by several writers. And Khilnani in this book himself agreed that Gandhi was one of the contributor. But Gandhi was not alone the contributor to the idea of India. It was contributed by Patel, Vallabhbhai Patel. It was contributed by Subhash Chandra Bose, and it was contributed by Bhimrao Ambedkar or B.R. Ambedkar. And finally, however, he is ready to give more weight to one stalwart of national freedom struggle, and that leader is an outstanding figure who created the idea of India as a striking idea. And of course, you know that figure, stalwart. It was Jawaharlal Nehru. And Khilnani agrees that it was Nehru who created, who had cemented that plurality as the idea of India. That plurality as the idea of India. Nehru wished to modernize India. Nehru wished to modernize India. He wished to insert into our conscience a universal history. He believed India is the garb of modernity. India is the garb of modernity. And this garb of modernity has not proved uniform. And Indians have found many indigenous ways of wearing it. See how beautifully Nehru perceived the plurality of India, friends. Nehru was the greatest nation builder. So he never endorsed the idea that India is not the India of a majority. India is not the India of Hindus, or India is not the home to a particular class of people. India is home to many, many people. That's why he famously said, through a rich metaphor, that is, the India, the garb of modernity has not proved uniform. India's modernity is not uniform. Indians have found many and indigenous ways of wearing modernity. You see, friends, how beautifully Nehru portrayed the idea of India, that there is no one way of modernity in India. Different sections of India's population have embraced modernity in very different way. And we have to respect that. You have to respect Muslims. You have to respect Hindus, Christians, Parsis, Buddhists, Jains. You have to respect all these, different sections of India's population. And all of these communities in India attain modernity by their own way. You should not superimpose any kind of, notion of modernity, and all people, you should persuade all people to embrace that idea of India. No. Let people have their own notion of a modern India. That is what Nehru said, the garb of modernity. And friends, in this book, Idea of India, Khilnani is going to tell you this idea of India through 4 chapters. It got almost 256 pages. And each chapter talks about a particular theme that created the notion of India. It got 4 chapters. And friends, India's march to future in 1947 was steady, and it had continuous growth. The democratic experiments had a continuous march towards future, but it was interrupted for a short period of time during the time of Indira Gandhi's emergency. And Indira Gandhi's emergency for a 22 months interrupted the idea of India. A 22 months eclipse during mid 1980s, 1970s, mid 1970s. The presence of democracy in India has been, interrupted. That Khilnani agrees that idea of India has, for a short period of time, has been put up with a full stop. And he believes India can be modern only through politics. India managed to achieve success only through politics. That India granted liberty to a larger measure to its citizens. You compare liberty in India with liberty in China. People in China don't know the meaning of liberty. But unlike China, India granted a whole measure of liberty and freedom to its people. Of course, we have moved towards future through what may be called politics. Politics destroyed privileges. Politics destroyed privileges. And in this process, no single vision triumphed. No single vision triumphed. It is not Gandhi's vision alone. It is not Nehru's vision alone. It is not Ambedkar's vision alone that triumphed. It was an assemblage of visions. And this vision was possible because we practice politics in the modern sense. And dramatically enough, India's march to future, to modern life, is also contradictory. He agrees that India's march to future, India's march to modernity is also replete with the contradictions. What is that? India's political and economic experiences have coincided most dramatically in its cities. And cities are symbols of the contradictory character of India's modern life. Cities are the symbol of the contradictory character of India's modern life. Go to ancient sacred space of Benares. You go to the decaying colonial pomp of Calcutta. You go to the high rationalism of Chandigarh. You go to the software utopia of Bangalore. You go to Bombay's uneasy blend of parochial politics and cosmopolitanism. Bombay is a city of parochial politics and cosmopolitanism, right? You will see these cities are living on the surpluses of prosperous countryside. These cities are living on the surpluses of the prosperous countryside, India's rural areas. So there is a discontinuity between India's city and India's countryside. That Khilnani agrees. There are pressures in the rural or countryside. And the urban centers are living on the surpluses of the countryside. And only a fragment of India's population have direct access to cities. And cities are temples of modernity, according to Nehru. India should go to cities, because where there is no casteism, in cities there is no casteism, there is no gender discrimination, there is no parochialism, and India should be urbanized. That is what Nehru believed. And India can be a modern society only if India is going to have more and more cities. But friends, even today, only a few sections of India's population will have access to cities. So friends, Khilnani is winding up this first chapter or introduction chapter, Ideas of India, by saying that the nationalist confidence in 1947, that they tried to define Indianness, and settled into a constitution, inaugurated an Indian state in 1947, and it was an optimistic story. In 1947, the nationalistic leadership had an optimistic story about a unified India. But friends, Khilnani wind up this essay by saying that the emergence of political Hinduism, the emergence of regional voices and aspirations from different parts of India, and the claims of different caste identities, these all have begun to challenge who is an Indian. Who is really an Indian? This political Hinduism challenged that nationalistic notion of Indianness. The regional voices of, like particularly the Dravidian movement of, Tandai Periyar, have questions the nationalistic notion of who is a Hindu, who is an Indian, or different caste identities, different regional identities have questioned that nationalistic notion of who is an Indian. And Nehru's idea of India, in a sense, tried to coordinate between different aspirations. Nehru's idea of India tried to find a common ground for different national identities. That's why he created a modern Indian state in India. And how Nehru created a modern nation state in India? By practicing democracy in true spirit, religious tolerance, economic development, and cultural pluralism. Nehru created modern India. But if you examine the historical trajectories of India since 1947, friends, you will see that idea is challenged now. There are several competitors to the idea of India in 1947. Now there is no single notion of India. Today. Friends, serious. There is no single notion of India today. The old arguments are replayed again. Today with the current generation, with your generation. Your generation is questioning that old idea of India. That's why Ambedkar is posted against Gandhi now. Vallabhbhai Patel is now posted against Nehru now. Now India is going to be divided by different identities. So the struggle for our past is, of course, a struggle for determining the future of the idea of India. And it is an endless struggle. And this struggle is continuing. This struggle is continuing in your generation, and your sons and their sons will also see the struggle of who is a real Indian. That's why he titled this essay as Ideas of India. And friends, with this, I am winding up this lecture, and now the floor is open for discussion. Questions are welcome.